Hello and good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. And thank you for joining us. My name is Matthew McDermott, and I'm going to be talking about solving business problems with customized search centers, specifically around the BCS. I'm a SharePoint Server MVP. I also work as a consultant and director at Aptalon Incorporated. I'm a trainer, and if you know me, you know that I'm a dog guy. In a previous life, I trained a search and rescue dog. I have a golden retriever now named Ruby, and she and I compete in a dog sport called agility, and I have been known to take a nap or two with her in her crate. Today we're going to be talking about business data, and the business data solution, BCS, in SharePoint has been around for quite a while. It's a pretty mature technology. One of the things I like most about the business data connectivity services is that it's a really well thought out end-to-end solution. So by way of review, you should know, if you haven't worked with the BCS, that it allows you to access business data, external data to SharePoint in a secure way. In fact, the Secure Store service makes this really easy to do. You can also create and use the data like a list in SharePoint. And I've been successful with some of my clients replacing old antiquated web technologies with external connections through the BCS and then just creating an interface using SharePoint lists or a SharePoint app. You can also augment lists and libraries with external data using external data columns. And I'll demonstrate this in a demo in a little bit. But the idea here would be bring the data from an external source in as metadata for your lists and libraries rather than recreate the data in SharePoint. You can also use them in quick parts in your documents themselves. This means that if you create a contract, you could actually have a customer lookup field directly inside the contract document associated with the metadata of the document to make it easier for your end users to be able to access that external data, pull it into your documents, and use it exactly where it's needed. There's also the capability built into applications like Outlook to actually take this data offline. That means that I can capture all of my contacts, say a list of customers, import them, pull them into Outlook, and then within Outlook, even when I'm not connected to the internet, have a full access to my customer list and be able to be busy, be working, be productive with data from a back-end data system that previous to this was only available when I was connected to the corporate intranet. And then finally, the solution we're seeking, which is to be able to crawl and surface external data in a search center and in a business context, solve some problems. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, is how to crawl and search external data and then present it to solve business problems. The process, there's actually I'm going to break this down into two separate groups of processes as we go through. But fundamentally, the process that you should be thinking about if you're thinking about an end-to-end solution is initially creating an external content type that allows you to access the data that you're trying to expose through search or in your metadata columns. Next, you have to ensure that the requirements are met for crawlability. And I'll demonstrate this, we'll also detail it in slides, but this is an essential requirement if you want to integrate search with your BCS. You also have to be sure, once you've created the external content type, that you configure the permissions on the external content type so that they can be crawled. You also have to configure, or at least consider, since we're talking about a search solution, where are my results going to lead? So if an end user is looking at one of your entities, in my case it's going to be a customer, how are they going to see that data? Where's the data going to be represented? Now, you may be crawling a data source that already has a web application associated with it. If that's the case, then can you just pass the ID of the entity to that web application? In that case, you could use something like the display URI field parameter. Otherwise, you're going to use the profile page that I'll demonstrate. Finally, you're going to crawl the external data. This is going to take the external data out of that data source and put it into the search index. So now, when people are searching for that external entity, they're going to find it because it's stored in the SharePoint index, and it's not going to cause an impact to the database. Once you have the data crawled, simply go through and configure the results. And this is also a multi-step process. That's why I put the asterisk there. And we'll be going through all of these steps as we go through this particular lecture. So when I think about BCS crawling and indexing, I kind of break it out into three separate phases, if you will. The phases for me are modeling the entity, crawling the entity, and then rendering the entity. So in the modeling phase, you're going to get permission to access the line of business data that you're seeking. So this might mean negotiating with a DBA, working with a data team to create an extract of data that you crawl, or some other process that's really external to this entire talk that says, where does the data live and how am I going to access it? But once you've figured that out, you're going to create a BCS model. So that model file, it's really just XML, defines what actions you're able to perform, the security involved, the connectivity involved, and how you're going to represent the data from the database. Once you've completed the modeling step, then you're going to have to configure search. So that'll be crawling. You're going to create a new content source, and that content source is going to specify your model, the BCS model that you created in the modeling phase. Once you've created the content source, you're going to crawl that content source, and that is going to put those search results into the index. Once you have indexed the BCS model, the data is there for you. You can now start querying it. And once you start querying that data, you'll see that the results are not great. So that's where you move into the rendering phase. And in the rendering phase, you'll start looking at your search results and decide what you want to do with them. You may just want to be able to see them, click on them, and get taken to a page. That's all just fine. But what if this is raw data out of a database? The database doesn't provide a page for you to land on. So in that case, we're going to use another native capability of SharePoint, which is the rendering of something called a BCS profile page. The profile page is just a web part page with an address that we provide. So we can put this anywhere we like. The default location is kind of not that great, so I'll show you how to configure your own to make rendering these results really easy. In this demo, I want to walk through the BCS model file, some of the important considerations on the model, as well as the configuration that I use for search for getting the results to show the way I anticipate. So we've created a customer model file, either using SharePoint Designer, using Notepad++, using one of the third-party tools like Lightning Tools, BCS MetaMan. When you're inspecting the model file to make sure that it's ready for searchability, you want to look in the line of business system instance, and you'll see customers. This is my customers model file. And what I'm looking for is that show in search UI is present. Now this is kind of weird. It's just a property that's here. It doesn't have any value. It just has to be there. That node's show in search UI has to be there. The other two requirements are that you have a specific finder, which is essentially what gets one customer back. And then you have a finder method. In my case, it's called get customers. And it's listed as a finder method. This allows you to query all of the customers and then one customer at a time. So you need a finder, a root finder, and show in search UI. Once you have those requirements met, then when you're looking at your search service, if I go into the enterprise search service application here, I see that the SharePoint crawl account is being used as the default content access account. That means that I can go back to the business data connectivity service and I can find my external content type. I can either choose the external content type itself, or if I want to just allow search access to all of the files, all of the entities, I can set metadata store permissions. And this is where the SharePoint search crawl account is going to have execute permissions on these entities. Now, that's an oversimplification because just having execute simply means that the BCS is going to let them execute the files. If the database doesn't allow permissions for the crawl account, then that'll be a second level that you'll need to set up yourself. But that's kind of beyond the scope of our lecture. Suffice to say, as long as your crawl account has access to the data and can execute the model file, then you're good to go. So once you have those configurations set up, you've satisfied the requirements for what I call crawlability. The next thing you want to do is crawl your external data. So I'm going to go back into my enterprise search service application, and I'm going to go to content sources, and I'm going to create a new content source for my external data, and I'm going to call this customers because that's what it is. Now, under my customers, I'm going to choose line of business data, and it's going to offer a list. In my case, I have only one BCS service application. I have one entity in that, one model file in there for my customers, and all I need to do is that. And now I can crawl my external data. So from here, we'll start a full crawl and then let that run. All right, so our crawl is complete, and we can verify that we had success by coming back here and choosing to view the crawl log. And right here I see my customers. It took me 1:48, and I crawled 407 customers. So I'm satisfied that that part of it worked. The interesting thing is if you look at the successes, what you'll see are these BDC3 links. These are ugly. This is because the default model doesn't have a URL to send the results to. So in fact, if I go to my search center and I do a search for something like Unique Pets, which is the name of one of my stores, this is what the result looks like. It's not very pretty. This is actually a database result here. And I think this is probably the most significant reason why companies don't pursue the BCS any further, because they get these very ugly search results because they don't understand how to configure simple things like the profile page and the search results, how to get the search results to look better. So that's our challenge now. Let's make that work better. So what we just saw in the demo, I have on this slide just to make sure that you guys have it for future reference. One of the keys for the user interface in search to light up and know that the BCS content source is actually available for crawling is the property called Show in Search UI. As long as you've got Show in Search UI and you have a finder and specific finder that are going to return all of the entities as well as one entity at a time by ID, you'll be able to crawl your content. Now, in my scenario, I'm using a data source. So because I'm using a database that has no web UI, I have to create my own web UI. And we'll be doing that in subsequent demos. But if you already have a web UI, then you can use the display URI field property with the URL that you'll build up using your entity to be able to render your results. So now that we have a BCS entity in our farm, let me show you some of the things you can do with it, some of the simple things you can do with it. Because once you have BCS data populating your lists and libraries, we can use that for building business solutions as well. Okay, so we've shown you how to make the search results, how to make the BCS results searchable. But let me show you how to use it in a list and thereby show you how to improve your search results. So in our case, our sales department wants to start using the BCS results in their customer issues list. They have this list of customer issues, and one of the things that they'd like to do is augment these results or augment these issues with the ID of the customer from the customer database. This is a perfect example of how to use the BCS. So I'm going to go into the list. I'm going to go to list settings. And here under columns, I'm going to add a new column called customer. Now in this case, the customer that I want to present to them is going to be a customer from my external data. So I choose the external data type. From my content types, I choose my customers. And then it's going to ask me what fields do I want to show. So in my case, we'll go ahead and show the company ID or the customer ID. And then I also want to show the company name, the email address, first name, and last name. And actually, let's do company name here and customer ID there. Okay, so I've got the customer name showing, and we'll choose OK. So now on my list, I have the customer's external data. So let's go ahead and move that guy up a little bit. Let's move it up to number 2. And now I can come back into my customer issues list, and when I edit these, like this leash delivered for the wrong order, I can edit this item. And if I choose the customer, like unique pets, then that customer is going to be associated with my item, with the customer ID 23672. So I can come through each of these and edit them, locate a customer any number of different ways, depending on how I have my content source set up, the way I have my BCS connection set up. We'll make these first two associated with our friend John here. And then I'll do a third one to another store. So we'll edit this last one, and we'll associate this with yet another store. Okay, so we have two associated with unique pets and one with elite pets. The problem is that when I try to go look at the information associated with this, you see that there's no action. And what I really want is I want a page that'll show me that customer. Well, it turns out that that's really what search is asking for too. So let's create that. And so what I've done in my intranet is I've simply created at the root. You can create this library anywhere you want, but I urge you to put it somewhere that people have access. So in this case, I called it BCS Profiles, and it's right at the root of my intranet. And I've got a couple pages here already, but let's go ahead and create a new one. These are simply new web part pages. So I'm going to create a new page. We'll create one with, doesn't really matter how we do it here. Let's try that. Well, let's do that one. Okay, these are web part pages. I'm going to call it customers. And I'm going to create this page. And it's just web parts. So we're going to add a couple of web parts to these pages. The first one that I'm going to add is kind of a routing web part. It's a business data web part that's associated with the item, and it's called a business data item builder. And what it really does, it just reads the query string. I'm going to add another one that's going to be the business data item. This is going to be the one that displays the web part, displays the data. So let's open the tool pane. And let's associate with this web part our content type. Now, if I wanted to, I could specify one item here, and it would display only that item. But that would be kind of lame, because I want this to be a data page that accepts a query from the query string. So I'm going to apply that setting. It now says customer. And from here, I'm going to connect this and get the item from the business data item builder. This error is totally normal. But again, I think people see that and they go, wow, I must have really done something wrong. And so they give up. But let me show you what that error means. It means it can't find a customer. Well, there's no customer ID on the query string. So let's fix that. I'm going to save and stop editing. I'm going to come back up here, and I'm simply going to put after this customer ID equals 23672, which is our unique pets customer ID. And lo and behold, we see the default rendering for this business data web part. So this is not very pretty, but we can fix that. You can make it way better. You edit the page, and you can come in and edit the web part, and you can actually modify. Unfortunately, it's XSL, but you can modify this XSL to output any way you want, and it's outputting the data columns that are coming from the external content type. Now, editing XSL is time consuming, but I've already done a little of it for you and produced a customer profile page that'll allow me to show a better looking customer profile. So now I've got clickable links here and other attributes. So let's choose OK here. Let's stop editing there. And now we've got these clickable links that look a little bit better. And now what we can do is take this URL, I should say, because that's a very SharePoint-y URL. Take this URL and let's apply that to our BCS model file. So I'm going to go back into Business Data Connectivity. I'm going to open out my customer. And down here under Actions is where I need to add an action. So this action is going to be called, well, I don't know, how about View Profile? And I'm going to navigate to this URL. Now the URL is the one we just created, but notice right here it says curly brace 0. If I do curly brace 0, it will automatically take the parameter, one of the many parameters, one of the many properties of my custom entity, and pass it right onto that BCS profile. So now that I've got that working, it says launch the action in a new web browser. I don't really need to do that. I mean, I could if I wanted to. And then I can even apply an icon here. So I'm going to make that the default action. We'll choose OK. And so now my view profile link is available, and we can test this out. If I just go back to my, if I just go back to my sales site and go back into my customer issues, I see view profile now. Click on the profile. Remember, we're on unique pets, and it takes me to unique pets, and it actually shows me a map to that location because of the custom style sheet that I applied. I'm taking this address and passing it out to Bing and getting the address in a map. Likewise, and you'll notice it opened it in a new window. Likewise, I can open up Elite Pets now, view profile. So I have profile pages working. It looks like I have a bad address there, but I have profile pages working. So let's see what happens when I crawl this again. So we're going to go back into Central Administration. We'll go back to the Search Service application. And now that we have that profile page in place, let's see how much better our results get. Okay, so now that our crawl is complete, if we go back to the crawl log and we view those same 407 successes, look at what we have now. We now have clickable links to our customer ASPX page with our customer IDs on them. So this ought to look a little bit better in search. I'm going to come back over here. We'll go to our search page and let's look for unique. So remember before it was a very ugly URL. Now I have unique pets, and by golly, I've got unique pets and I've got a link here. This link takes me to my custom profile page. So by using the profile page, we're starting to take control of our search results, and this is a good thing. In our next demo, we'll talk about how to pull all this together. All right. So we've accessed our external data, and now we're starting to use it in our lists and libraries in SharePoint. This can be a really powerful capability that you haven't used before because now we've got metadata that's coming from a live database system. So when we start looking at new content sources using our customers, we have to start thinking about how those customer results are going to look. And quite often you're going to want to create just a whole separate place just for that special data. And you can do that by configuring the results. The process that I use is I start by creating managed properties from my BCS data. The managed properties allow us to take the stuff that we've been crawling and use it in database-like queries if we want, use it in refinement, use it in search, but also display it on the page so that everything looks good. We can also create custom result sources. A result source is like what we used to use or call a scope. But a result source in this case is going to allow us to have one place to go view all of our customer data. We can also create a custom search results page. And on the result page, we can also apply custom refinement, custom display templates, so that everything starts really looking good. We can also create a custom result vertical. These are kind of those tabs across the top of the search center, but we can create one specifically for our customers. And then I've been talking about the custom profile page. So a profile page is just a web part page that we assemble ourselves, but then we're going to specify it in the BCS external content type so that search knows how to get us to that profile page to show off our customer results. And then finally, we're going to wire it all up and try to make a really great customer experience for being able to find our customer information. So in this demo, I want to show you how the pieces all fit together. We're going to bring in the customer data. We're going to create those managed properties. We're going to create a BCS-centric search center to be able to find the customer data and then view the customer information, not only from the database, but also view the customer information from SharePoint. So it's important to note that when the crawl occurs and it hits your data source, it's actually also creating something called crawled properties. If I go into the search schema in Enterprise Search and I look under crawled properties, I can change the category here to business data, and it'll show me the different customer entities. So here's customer city, address line 1 and 2. All of these customer fields are coming from my BCS entity. In fact, there's even a name, entity name, that I can use to be able to help me with filtering later on. So I've gone ahead and created managed properties specifically associated with my crawled properties so that I can use them in my search solution. So let's look at sort of a structured approach to creating that solution now. If you recall, when we were on our search page, we have the different verticals for everything, people, conversations, and video. I want to create one here for customers so that my customers don't show up down here all by themselves, but they actually show up on their own tab. So let's look at how to do that. The first step is to create a new result source. So in Central Administration or in the site collection, you can create a new result source by selecting Result Sources and then choose New Result Source. My result source is going to be called Customers, and this is customer data. From the database. Now this is local to my farm, so I'm going to leave that at local SharePoint, and it's going to be part of the SharePoint search results. The query transform is going to be using that BCS entity name managed property that I created. So I can come up here and I can select the property, and this is going to be my BCS entity name, and I'm looking for it to contain the value of, which is what I called my BCS entity. So I'm going to add a property filter for that, and we can test that query. I've not had much success with using the query builder inside of Central Administration. So if I do the same thing in my Search Results Center, it won't be global, it won't be farm-wide, but for my search results, it will be available for the site collection. So let me show you what that should look like if you're worried about the fact that that didn't work. Come into Site Settings, same place, go into Result Sources, create a new result source, call it Customers, and then launch the query builder. So again, this is where we're going to use the BCS entity name, contains the value of DHT customer, and I can test that query, and I do see that I get my customers back. So it doesn't necessarily work in the Enterprise Search Service application, but it does work in the site collection. I'm going to keep it at the Search Service application because I want it to be global to my farm. And then one other thing that I'm going to do, and this is just sort of an advanced trick, is if you surround it with curly braces and a question mark like that, the query won't fire if search terms is empty. And so I think that's all I need. Make sure there's just one space there. Test that query, we're all good. And I'll choose OK. So that's going to create my result source in Central Administration that when I come back to my site collection and I look at site collection result sources, I'll now see that I have a customer's search service application-based result source. The rest of the work that I do, I'm going to do at the site collection level because I don't need the rest of the work to be global. So we have a result source. So now let's create a page that we can use to display our search results. I can do that quite simply by choosing Add a Page. In here, I'm going to call this one customer results. And then I'm going to let me save this page and let me show you what actually happened there. Under site contents, if I go into pages, it actually just created this customer results page. So that's all that happened. It just created a simple search results page. I can view this page. I can edit this page. And what I'm going to do is simply change the search results web part so that it uses our new result source. So I'm going to change the query and make one small change. Right here, I'm going to tell it to use customers. So now when I test this query, nothing happens because the query is empty. Go to test, show more, search for unique. Test the query, I get unique pets back. So it's actually using the query text unique plus BCS entity name equals DHT customer, which brings me just that one pet store. If I want a bunch of pet stores, I can just type in pet and test that query. I get a bunch of pet stores back. So you create the result source, nothing happens. Then you use the result source, and now we start to see better results. So I can choose OK there. I can choose OK here. I can check in the page, continue, and now publish the page. So this page is now available, but of course it's not showing up on my top navigation. So let's fix that. That is a custom result vertical. So let's go into site settings. Let's go to search settings, and under search settings is the navigation. So I'm going to create a new link. We're going to call this one customers. And the URL is simply going to be a link to our customer results page. Choose OK here. And now back to our page. So here I'm going to search for unique. That brings up all items that have unique in the name. Come over here to customers. There's unique pets. So now we're starting to see that we can create these experiences where these pages start to really work in our favor because we're using result sources, result pages, and of course by the time we click on the link, it's going to take us to our custom customer profile page. So I'm really starting to like the look and feel of this. It's starting to feel like it's a really cohesive thing. The last thing I want to do is I want to create a custom display template. Now this could take a couple hours, a couple days, depending on how complicated you want to make it. I've already done one. I just want to show you how to wire it up. And we'll wire it up by going into site settings. We'll go into our result types this time. We're going to create a new result type rule, and we're going to call this one customers. And the customers result type rule is going to match. So we don't have any of the out of the box types that we're matching. So instead we can do show more conditions, and we can use that same property. We can say if the BCS entity name equals any of DHT customers, then we want it to match. The display template we want to use is going to be our customer item. This is custom. I created this, and it's going to load our item customer JavaScript file. Choose save here, and we've got our rule. So now what we should be able to do is go back to the search center, be able to execute our search, our query for, I think we've been using unique all along, UNIQUE. And now if it's working right, we should start seeing our customers get loaded in here. Sometimes it takes just a moment or two. So I'm going to give another minute and then do a full refresh here. I'm going to do a Control F5 just to make sure everything loads. And what we should see, there it is. There's our unique pets display template with a unique hover card. And then if we click over to customers, we can see the same thing. And so now to finish out this page, I've added some additional refinement. I'm going to go back into edit the page. And it's important to note, if you don't want to create a result type rule, but you only want the uniqueness, you only want the display template to show here, edit the search results web part, open out the display templates, change the rendering here and force it to your display template. But if you want to add some refinement, we've got refinable fields as well. So I can edit the web part, choose my refiners. And in this case, let's come down here and choose a country or region. Let's add a partner level, salesperson, and year-to-date sales. And then let's remove some of these guys. We don't need content class. We know what these guys are. These are all customer results. So let's get rid of those. Maybe put the salesperson at the top and leave that as a regular salesperson. Let's grab the partner level, move him up, change these names, refine by salesperson, partner level, country. For the country, we've got a fancy little chart refiner. Year-to-date sales, let's move that one up. Let's change that to a slider with bar graph. Maybe partner level. Let's create a metal refiner for that. And then choose OK here. Once we choose OK there, choose OK here. Check in our results, publish the draft, and then search for all our customers by using star. Once we do that, we can see that we've got, oops, made a little mistake there. Edit the page, back into refinement. Editing these refiners can be really tricky sometimes, and I just completely messed it up. So let's try it again. Partner level should be a metal refiner. Year-to-date sales should be a slider with bar graph. And country or region. Come on. Well, it just doesn't want to get off of year-to-date sales, does it? So let's do some custom thresholds here. 1,000. 15,000, 25,000, 50,000. I think that looks good. Choose OK there. Always choose OK here. Save the page, check it in, and publish. All right, I think we got it right that time. So we'll go here with the star. So we got gold, silver, and metal, gold, silver, and bronze metals. We have year-to-date sales here. We have clickable links for our salespeople, maps, and we're able to actually get some work done with our BCS data now. So creating these display templates, that's covered on my presentation on Channel 9. There's a lot of information out there on creating display templates. What I really wanted to show you was how you can take BCS data, pull it into the search engine, get the URLs configured so that all you have to do is click on the link and we take us to our customer profile page and be able to get that information out. Now there's one last thing I want to do with the customer profile page, and that's I want to get SharePoint search results in there too. So let's edit this page. Let's come down here and let's drop a search results web part on the page. So if I drop a search results web part on the page and choose add, then I can come in, I can configure this search results web part by editing the web part. I can tell it to go get data. So we want to change the query. And in this case, I want to use the customer ID parameter that's coming off of the query string. So let's get rid of the search box query and let's change this to a parameter from the URL. And our parameter, of course, is customer ID. Now, the way that we want to use the customer ID is we want to make sure that DHT customer ID, our custom managed property, pulls back that info. But what we notice is that it's only bringing back our customers from our BCS results. So let's force it to bring back the customer, the ID that we're looking for. I'm sorry, the content that we're looking for, which is an issue tracking list. So now if I choose the issue tracking list, it says, well, I can't find anything. And it can't find anything because 23501 is not in there. That's not our unique pets ID. So let's fix that in the tester here and go 23672, which is our test ID for unique pets. Execute that query, and we get our 2 issues from our issue list. Is that cool? Choose OK here. Choose OK here. And then finally, stop editing the page. And what should happen is if we go back to our search center, we should now be able to search for unique pets. On the home page, we see that unique result. If we go to our customers page, we see our unique result. Click the link, takes us to our custom page, but it also shows us SharePoint data about that same customer. Remember, we entered those too. So this is what I think about when I think about building out a BCS search results page. Get the customers, get the data from the database, get the data from SharePoint, build me a 360-degree view of that customer with everything I know from inside SharePoint and inside our databases. So we showed you how to wire it all up, from creating an end-user experience that begins in search and ends on a customer 360 page, how to create profile pages that make use of more than just the out-of-the-box BCS parts, but they use the search parts too. So now you're starting to think about your own solutions. And so here are some final thoughts as you begin that process. First of all, custom BCS crawling is currently only available on premises. That means that if you have the access to the data, then you can create these solutions in SharePoint on premises. Now, you can do BCS in Office 365, but you can't crawl the BCS content. So you could still do the data augmentation, you could add it to lists and libraries, but you can't crawl it. So if you want to use Office 365 as your search source, then and still augment that information with on-premises BCS results, you'd need to look at some of the new hybrid configuration that's coming out. This was announced at Ignite, and it requires you to crawl your local content sources and then publish that information to Office 365's index so that it would be included in the search results in Office 365. There are some additional considerations as well. For instance, security. If you have a database that has individually secured records or some other complex security requirements, then you're going to want to consider a crawl time trimmer that allows you to decorate those search results with the right access controls to be able to prevent them from being displayed when you're doing your search. You may also want to consider parent-child relationships. In databases, it's quite often to have a customer and orders relationship or a timesheet and list items relationship. In those cases, you can configure the BCS so that when child entities are discovered, they can show up as search results, or just the parent of that child shows up as search results. These and a lot of other considerations are spelled out in Scott Hillier's book called Professional Business Connectivity Services in SharePoint 2010. It's a great resource for creating BCS solutions and pays for itself on the very first project that you do. So I highly recommend it if you're going to be working with the BCS and trying to implement any kind of complex environment around the BCS. Again, I really thank you for attending, and I hope you've enjoyed this presentation.